Now that the MCU is about to enter the multiverse of madness, they will surely introduce a roster of new, powerful characters. WandaVision has already teased the arrival of Nexus Beings in the MCU with one of their strange ads, and they might have already introduced us to some of those beings in the previous films without us even noticing. According to Marvel lore, Nexus Beings are rare people who have the power to affect probability and even alter the flow of the universal time stream. In the comics, only one Nexus Being is supposed to exist in every dimension at a time. But with the Scarlet Witch opening the gates to the multiverse, this might change really soon. In today's video, I will discuss 15 possible characters that could be Nexus Beings in the future of the MCU. To kick off today's potential Nexus Beings list, let's start with the god of mischief himself, Loki. Although the mischievous Loki has cheated death more than once throughout the MCU's many films, his last moments at the hand of the purple giant Thanos in Avengers Endgame might sadly just be permanent this time. However, the character played by Tom Hiddleston is back once again in the upcoming Disney Plus series Loki. The series that is scheduled to premiere on June 11th will feature an alternate version of Loki who's stolen the Tesseract and created a brand new timeline during the time the Avengers were doing all that time traveling. The peculiar-looking show hints at him being or becoming a Nexus Being as TVA, which is short for the Time Variance Authority, is involved in the events of the new series. In the Marvel Universe, the TVA has an important role in keeping an eye on all Nexus Beings since they have the power to impact probabilities and the future, which could mess up with timelines and parallel universes. And with Loki's track of bringing chaos wherever he goes, I have a feeling he just might create, alter, or even destroy a timeline or two while playing his evil tricks. That plus a reality-changing, dimension-traveling witch bound to do anything to get her kids back. After the damage that a giant like Thanos brought to the MCU over 3 phases of movies, Marvel has to up its game when it comes to villains. That's where Kang the Conqueror enters the game as the potential new main threat to the next few phases. The supervillain who bore many names throughout the eras, from Iron Lad, Ramatut, the Scarlet Centurion, and finally to the OP Immortus, will appear in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and will be played by actor Jonathan Majors. As his name states, Kang likes to conquer worlds, and since he is a Nexus Being, well, at least in the comics, he came to represent several different realities, making them throughout his career as a big bad. But the worlds he collects are not all from the same timeline, as he possesses time travel abilities beyond anything we've seen in the MCU so far. On top of acquiring these different worlds set in different times, he collects technology from every single era he visits, which makes him exceed even Tony Stark in terms of tech advancement. In another dimension than ours found in Marvel's many comics, Vision is actually a Nexus Being. Known as Ultravision in the parallel world called Earth 09110, Ultravision is an ex-Avenger who now occupies the important role of leading guide of the world. While we might meet another Vision through Wanda's journey across the multiverse, something tells me that won't happen since we've seen so many versions of Vision so far in the MCU. With Vision dying at the hands of Wanda, then again with Thanos turning back the clock to claim the Soul Stone for himself, the resurrected Hex Vision in Westview, and finally White Vision, who's made out of Wanda's power source directly but without a Soul Stone, bets are if Vision becomes a Nexus Being, it'll be the all-new White Version. This could make for an interesting storyline after White Vision goes to Wakanda to retrieve the missing emotional data Shuri most probably stored in her computer. If White Vision has the power of a Nexus Being, this means he could travel across dimensions to find, and perhaps eventually save, the family he lost after the events of WandaVision. Rick Jones of Earth 616 is one of the main reasons Bruce Banner became the Hulk. While Dr. Banner was testing the gamma bomb he created, the 16-year-old Rick arrived at the scene to witness the event. Thinking that the countdown had to be delayed, Banner ran to the test site to get Rick out of there, but it was too late. While Banner succeeded in throwing Rick into a trench, the Doctor got bombarded with gamma radiation, and the rest is history. Eventually, Rick got his own powers that surpassed Hulk's own, as he turned into an immortal gamma of tapping into a mysterious force known as the Destiny Force. This profound power gives him the ability to alter reality, and even bring flesh to characters from his own imagination, and even different times of existence. Rick could make for an interesting new addition to MCU's team of superheroes in the form of a Nexus Being from another dimension. It could also give the MCU an important opportunity to expand on Mark Ruffalo's Bruce Banner, who might have just not yet explored his gamma powers to the fullest. Okay, now this is a pretty obvious one. In the Marvel comics, she is not only one of the most powerful mutants out there, but also the official Nexus Being of the main Earth dimension. With everything that happened to her since Avengers Age of Ultron, she was more than once tempted to go full Dark Phoenix. And with the awakening of the Scarlet Witch inside of her during the events of WandaVision, something tells me she's not done navigating the spectrum between good and evil. According to WandaVision's post-credits scene finale, she might be responsible for the chaos that will ensue in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, as she seems to be opening up the door to the multiverse when hearing Billy and Tommy calling out to her. Learning to control and maybe increase her chaos magic from the Darkhold spells, the origin story of one hell of a powerful, perhaps evil, Nexus Being. Lore is another confirmed Nexus Being from the Marvel Comics. The red-headed sorceress is basically a counterpart of the Scarlet Witch. She has similar powers than Wanda, as she too can manipulate people's minds. She can also raise and control the dead, and what makes her even more dangerous is the fact that she can drain the energy from whole planets in order to power herself up. Since her main goal in the comics is to travel from dimension to dimension to take out every single Nexus Being, chances are she will clash with the Scarlet Witch while journeying across the multiverse. Taking into account that she employed Master Pandemonium to do her bidding in the comics, and the latter eventually got his arms returned in the form of Billy and Tommy, Lore might either show up in the MCU in name, making Master Pandemonium her puppet villain, or she might just be the one holding the twins prisoner. One way or another, it'd be pretty cool to see more witches play with the dark arts across Phase 4 and beyond, as long as they calm down a bit on all those red herrings. Having visited the time stream by using the Time Stone more than once, and set to be the main protagonist of the upcoming Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Stephen Strange is clearly one contender for the title of Nexus Being. While the rules from the Marvel Comics state that there can only be one per reality, the MCU is far from obligated to follow it, being free to construct their own universe as they seem fit. With sorcerers, witches, and all sorts of magical empowered beings entering the MCU, Doctor Strange will surely have an important role in what's to come. After all, he's one of the rare heroes who had direct experience with other dimensions when he was up against Caecilius and the interdimensional entity Dormammu of the Dark Dimension. It's quite unclear yet how the MCU will bring about the Nexus Beings, but it's interesting to take into account that just like Wanda's Hex modified Monica Rambeau's DNA, other dimensions can also change someone from within, granting them new abilities or have horrific results like Caecilius, who turned into a mindless one. Merlyn is the legendary wizard from old tales and classic films like The Sword in the Stone. In the Marvel Universe, he is a Nexus Being, but just like Doctor Strange, also serves as a Sorcerer Supreme for a time. Merlyn resides in a pocket dimension near Earth and acts as an intersection between Earth 616 and the other realms of the multiverse. This land of magic and fairies has been badly affected when the Scarlet Witch changed reality on Earth during the events of House of M. If Otherworld is featured in the next Doctor Strange film, this could mean that we will see the repercussions of Wanda's Hex, or whatever door she'll open when searching for her children. Since Merlyn is in charge of bringing balance to all realities by tweaking some events for the benefit of the Omniverse, he could be a nice addition to the roster of sorcerers and witches coming our way. Another interesting way Merlyn could be used in Phase 4 would be to have all his selves, which are linked mentally throughout the multiverse, act as guides for Scarlet Witch, Doctor Strange, or hey, why not both? While in the comics, Earth 616's Spider-Man is not a Nexus Being, but his Earth 772 counterpart is. In that dimension, Peter Park is a part of a group of superheroes called the Fantastic Five, which is basically Fantastic Four plus one. Towards the end of his life, Spidey 772 got attacked by a villain by the name of Karn. Also was known as Master Weave. This nasty-looking fellow is basically a superhuman being with spider powers just like Spider-Man. His main goal is to travel across worlds to kill and absorb the life energy of all Spider-Men, making him stronger every single time. While Tom Holland's Spider-Man could be a Nexus Being, I frankly don't see the point. But what would be interesting is to bring Spidey 772 into the mix, and introduce the Fantastic Four that way. Plus we get a new cool spider-themed villain to fight with all those Peter Parkers that were announced. Just like Rick Jones, Leonard Tippit can access the Destiny Force. The problem with Leonard is that he was an out-of-control Nexus Being who unconsciously influenced probabilities, and threatened to bring about a nuclear hell across the whole planet. As a dangerous ticking time bomb, Leonard had to be stopped. So Uatu the Watcher, who is a powerful alien who likes to watch, and is supposed to do only that, intervened and manipulated the Avengers into doing his bidding. The Watcher assigned to Earth eventually devised a meticulous plan to get to the team of heroes to catch Leonard, and eventually help Uatu lock the Nexus Being out of space and time. The Watcher then neutralized the threat while not getting his hands dirty. Cyclops' brother Havok, who we've seen shoot energy from his chest throughout the second X-Men trilogy, is also a Nexus being in the comics. In the Mutant X and Exiles comics, it was revealed that Alex Summers acts as a Nexus for all the other versions across the multiverse. While we probably won't see any actors from the previous X-Men trilogy appear on screen after this whole Ralph, Boner/Pietro ordeal, the introduction of Havok as a Nexus being could slowly pave the way for the upcoming film The Mutants. Perhaps Alex and Scott Summer could be introduced to the MCU as an alternate versions of the ones we meet later on in the next X-Men films, or as minor characters in some faraway dimension under attack by Lore or Kang the Conqueror. Sise-Neg from Earth 74113 is one scary supervillain who has no other goal than simply to become God himself. Similar to Kang, Sise-Neg is a time traveler from the future, but also a power sorcerer like Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch. In the comics, he eventually absorbs all the magical energy from the Marvel Universe in order to create a new one in his image. After the change of heart, he decides to press the reset button and recreate the Big Bang to let things happen naturally. The ambitious and powerful sorcerer was born in the 31st century, and in his world most people actually have the ability to use magic. But since magical energy is apparently a finite source, people couldn't control much of it. Sise-Neg, being hungry for more, started time traveling to absorb mystical energy from across the eras. A future where everyone is capable of wielding magic could hint at where Wanda's story is heading, and what kind of Pandora's box she opened at the end of WandaVision. Wolverine seems to have it all: almost eternal youth, invincibility, cool adamantium claws, the opportunity to time travel in Days of Futures Past. But he was also a Nexus being in a dimension called Earth 9250. This Wolverine is similar to the one we know from the movies played by Hugh Jackman. But one small detail: he's a vampire mutant. It turns out that on top of having Wolverine's powers and add-ons he got from the Weapon X experiment, he has vampire abilities in the likes of Dracula. Now that's pretty awesome. Now I'm not quite sure we'd see such a character in the MCU, although it'd be incredibly goofy, but also could be a fun way to introduce vampires before the arrival of Blade, featuring the incomparable Mahershala Ali. Well, technically there's also Morbius, but let's see if those Sony Pictures universe of Marvel characters, or Spunk films, will actually link to Spider-Man first. Did you know that Dracula was part of the Marvel comics? Since he's one hell of a magical vampire, he could be the perfect opponent for sorcerers and vampires like Blade. Eleyn, the Witch Queen of the Amazites, only appeared briefly in the Marvel comics. She was born as the Nexus being of Amazar, and was turned into a villain despite herself. She was eventually driven to insanity, having constant nightmares that were the cause of a spell put on her by Lore, the evil dimension-traveling Nexus. As I have explained a bit earlier in the video, Lore can manipulate people's minds just like the Scarlet Witch can. In the case of Eleyn, her goal was to break her spirit so that she could possess her body until she could absorb all of her energy and move on to her next victim. But the problem is Ellen's soul became corrupted and she could not rest in peace. That is, until the Scarlet Witch defeated Lore, which freed all of the Nexus beings Lore destroyed, helping them attain peace at last. If a character like Eleyn would be featured in one of those upcoming Marvel films, it could make for a good occasion to redeem Wanda for all the wrong she caused the people of Westview, and maybe even everything that's yet to come in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Today's last entry goes to Jean Grey, one of the most powerful Nexus beings out there. As an Omega-level mutant, her powers are slightly similar to the Scarlet Witch in terms of psychic powers, which would make her a perfect contender for the role of Nexus Being of one of the worlds we will get to discover during Phase 4. In one dimension, she even travels to the Dark Dimension, where she was convinced by Kang the Conqueror to channel and use the Phoenix Force in order to defeat the powerful Goblin Queen and the evil Dormammu. Jean Grey being one of the most well-known X-Men, there's little to no chance that she won't appear in The Mutants. I imagine if the MCU decides to keep her as a Nexus being, she could come from another dimension. But there's another more interesting option I really hope to see happen. What would happen if the Nexus being from one dimension was gone for too long? Let's say the Scarlet Witch gets lost somehow in the multiverse. This could leave MCU's Earth without an anchor to the multiverse, right? While that might be a bad thing, could another Nexus being be born or awaken from the lack of a former one? In this case, it would make perfect sense that Jean Grey would be the next Nexus being. And in this scenario, it could make for one hell of a fight when Scarlet Witch comes back from her multi-dimensional travels and Jean Grey unleashed the power of the Phoenix. One important character that did not make today's final cut is Thor's father Odin. While he died in Thor Ragnarok, the former king of Asgard is pretty much still around, well, at least in spirit form. With all that dark magic going on in the MCU lately, there are chances we might get this powerful Nexus being back, if not in Phase 4, maybe in Phase 5.